So the UFC is going to be returning to Mexico after quite a few years of not hosting an event there. They're going to be going back to Mexico City on February the 24th in 2024. And when the UFC tends to put on some international cards, we do tend to see a couple of local fighters get signed to the promotion to make their debut on that card. And that's what I've kind of gone and done in this video. I'm going to be talking about the best fighters from Mexico that have not been signed to the UFC that I think that the UFC very well could and should sign to debut on this card. So hopefully we see one fighter from this list make their UFC debut on this card. I'm looking forward to this card in general though. I mean, you've got Moreno and Albazi on the main card, confirmed to be the co-main event of a fight night. And we know that Brandon Moreno is a big name, and we know that he's a big name in Mexico, so that must mean one thing. The main event is a title fight, and it probably does involve Alexa Grasso in some way, but it could be a different title fight. Who knows? Maybe they're like, hey, Leon Edwards, defend your belt ASAP. But I think it's going to be Alexa Grasso taking on Valentina Shevchenko, or maybe Erin Blanchfield. We'll see. Aside from that, a couple flyweight fights, a couple bangers as well. I mean, Chares Lacerda, it's been rebooked. It's going to be a good fight. And Victor Altamirano taking on Felipe Dos Santos. Felipe Dos Santos does not know how to have a boring fight. They're good prelims. But now let's get into the fighters I was mentioning in the intro. The first one is Christian Perez. He's 13-1 and only 24 years old, but he is a little bit small for lightweight. Sorry, he's 5'9", but he's not a massive 5'9", because in the UFC there are some pretty big flyweights out there. You got a couple guys that are 6'2", 6'3", running around. But Christian Perez, a solid fighter, beaten good competition as well in his career. He did lose a couple of years ago, but he bounced back, taking on pretty good competition. All of these guys with winning records that he has fought in his whole career, which is not really something you see too much. But more importantly as well, a couple of these wins are kind of solid. The win over Bruno Canetti might not look like too much, but Bruno Canetti is a decent fighter, even though he is quite old. Canetti just went out there and won in Argentina in 40 seconds in his last fight. And a bunch of guys with winning records, pretty decent backgrounds. It's a good win. It's a good bunch of wins that Christian Perez has. And he's only 24 years old. If you give him time, I think he would develop quite well fighting in the UFC. But maybe I would understand if you wanted to give him more time. But I've got another 24-year-old here, Luis Rodriguez. I feel like I've talked about this guy in many videos because he's just quite good, you know, but he's just not in the UFC. He's 16-2. He's a bantamweight, 24, as I did state, very young, and he has been on the Contender Series in the past. He lost to Jerome Rivera. Really bad loss, to be honest. Jerome Rivera just didn't have a good UFC run after beating Rodriguez whatsoever. But Rodriguez has turned it around. 5-fight win streak right now, beating guys with good records, you know, 5-1, 5-0, 6-1. He's taking on good competition. He's beating good competition. 24 years old. Incredible record as well. A lot of experience, 18 fights. He could be ready for the UFC. Another fighter I do believe is ready for the UFC is Alex Sanchez. He's also a lightweight. He's 5'11" and he's a boxer. He's actually going to be fighting this weekend, the week that this video comes out. Alex Sanchez is actually fighting on the 23rd of December for Uriah Faber's A1 Combat. So if you wanted to watch him fight, you can watch him fight this weekend. I do think he wins that fight. He's a boxer. He's pretty aggressive on the feet, and he does have very good takedown defense. He did defend a lot of takedowns against Eddie Hotch, and he has had to defend takedowns throughout his career because he is an aggressive and decent boxer. That's how he fights. He does throw a lot of leg kicks as well, especially when he's fighting a wrestler. He'll throw a lot of leg kicks. But I do believe that we see Alex Sanchez go out there. If he finishes Anthony Figueroa, who's a 4-0 undefeated up-and-coming prospect, we'll probably see Sanchez sooner rather than later, unless it's on the Contender Series. But he's got a good record. He's beating good competition. He's 29 years old. He's in his prime right now. He trains with Brandon Moreno as well. So really, what more could you ask? I think that this is definitely a possibility for him to sign to the UFC. Ramiro Jimenez is another matchup or another fighter that I'd like to bring up here. 24 years old. Again, there's a lot of good 24-year-old Mexican prospects. These guys could be something big in like 3 or 4 years. One of these three guys that I'm talking about right now, 10-0 for Ramiro. and he's won a lot of these fights by finish as well. 8 wins by finish, 8 wins in the first round. He has beaten good competition as well. 7-2, KO round 1, 8-2, submission round 1. I mean, he's knocking guys out in the first round, submitting guys in the first round. He's undefeated as an MMA fighter in amateur and pro. He's dominating competition that he's at right now. I think he's ready, and he's ready for a step up in competition. I think you need to give Ramiro Jimenez someone that is a little bit better than the competition he's fighting right now, and that can be found in the UFC. He trains at the Goat Shed as well, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I want to see Jimenez in the UFC as well. Dana White's Contender Series could be a good option as well, but I think he's a good fighter. And Ernesto Ibarra is also a good fighter. If you wanted to keep the Mexican flyweight theme going, have Jesus Aguilar on the card, and then have Ernesto Ibarra on the card. Do you want to have 4 separate fights that are flyweights on one card? Probably not, but Ernesto Ibarra would rise to the occasion in my opinion. I think he's quite good. He's 9-1. Most of his wins are by decision, but to be fair, guys at the lower weight classes don't really tend to have the most amount of power. He's beaten some good guys in the past, an 8-2 win, 7-4 win, 5-3 win. He's kind of getting there. He's beating good guys. He fought earlier this month. He's staying active. He could be an option as well if the UFC was to try and go down that road. And another fighter, and the final fighter that I do have on the list, is Brian Zercher, who's actually fought for the PFL before. And I don't know too much about that because maybe the PFL still has him under contract. So maybe that they can't sign him. But he's fought 4 times in the PFL, and he's won 4 times in the PFL. Maybe an option for the UFC to explore. Has he fought the best guys when he's in the PFL? No. But he still kind of did it. He still kind of built a name in the PFL. If the UFC could snag him on a small contract, I think that they'll probably be beneficiaries of that. But we'll see. We'll see what kind of happens there. I know the PFL probably still has him under contract, and they're probably just letting him fight for Lux Fight League if he can get easy fights and build up his record a bit more. But if he's available, why not? Why not the UFC pick him up and have him on this card? I'm going to do a card builder as well for this event, for this card. There's a lot of Mexican fighters on the roster now, so I should be able to get a pretty solid card going with a lot of fighters from Mexico and a lot of fighters that represent Mexico. Grasso and Shevchenko, or Grasso and Blanchfield, is probably going to be the main event, let's be honest. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think any of these prospects would be good in the UFC? And are you looking forward to this card? With that being said, I'll see you guys in the next one.